Hey there, this is Brian. Welcome to another video. Today's topic, taking advantage of market psychology. On the current secondhand market for 35mm cameras, the popular thing, the trend, is point and shoots from the 70s and 80s, many of which were primarily plastic and not made particularly well. These things just aren't going to last, and they have a very limited feature set. Some of them had decent lenses, some did not. Why these things are so insanely popular, I'm not sure. But this video is all about taking advantage of what I consider a market distortion based upon bad information. The Konica Autoreflex system was one of the great built-like-a-tank systems of the 1960s and 1970s. It is in the same class with the Nikkormat, the Minolta SRT series, the Canon FTb, and what's the other one I'm forgetting? Canon, Minolta, Nikon, Olympus OM1 maybe, sort of-ish. But the big ones were the Auto Reflex, the SRT, the Canon FT and FTb, and the Nikkormat. And those are all those cameras are very similar. They were produced around the same period of time and offer basically the same features. Konica also offers a really nice lineup of very high quality lenses. The Konica Hexanon lenses are very highly thought of. They are regularly referred to as legendary in the photographic literature, and they are grossly underpriced today along with the Auto Reflex cameras. So I want to give you a brief rundown of the Auto Reflex series so that you've got the information you need to go out there and get you a really nice 35mm SLR for bargain basement prices. Take advantage of other people's ignorance and take a look at Konica. So let's see here. So the Konica Auto Reflex series, I've detailed it below, or I've detailed it here. Introduced in 1965 as the Auto Reflex, had two words. Subsequent models were called Auto Reflex in one word. This was introduced in 65 at the same time as the Nikkormat FT. Here on the side of, I've got the Nikkormat comparable dates for comparison. So this camera it's a bit antiquated today. It's got it does not have through the lens metering. It had a shutter speed dial here with a cadmium sulfide metering cell external to the camera body. And you don't, well, you know, I was going to say you don't see them too much, but they pop up every once in a while on the used market. The neat thing about that particular model, about the Auto Reflex, is that it has a switch right here, right around here, where you can, I mean, not on this camera, obviously, this is the T2, but it's got a switch on it where you can switch between full frame and half frame. So if you're into half frame 35mm photography, get one of these. It is one of the, I don't know if there's another camera that does that has a switch on it that switches between full and half frame, but the original Auto Reflex does, and today that's the standout feature for this model. It was replaced in 1968 by the T1, which looked pretty much identical to this, except for the shutter locking function. Konica, during this period, simply referred to this model as the Auto Reflex T, but customers and collectors referred to it as the T1 because it was updated in 1970 with certain updates and features, and was called the T2. This is a T2, and you can tell the T1 from the T2 by the shutter locking feature right here. Okay, here the shutter's open and here it's locked. Okay, so that look for this and you'll know whether or not you're looking at a T1 or a T2. That's the quickest, easiest way to distinguish these things if you're looking at, say, a listing online. So the T1 and T2 were produced from 68 to 73, coincided with the Nikkormat FTN. 1973, the T3 was introduced, which was an evolutionary update of the T2, again co-produced alongside the FTN. 1975, the T3N, N standing for new, which was again a minor evolutionary update of the T3. All these cameras are very similar, very similar. The T3N was its direct competitor from Nikon was the FT2, and here we see where the auto reflexes are beginning to fall behind the times, because in '75 most manufacturers, when they introduced a new camera, were opting for 1.5 volt silver oxide batteries, and Konica, for reasons I do not understand, stubbornly stuck with mercury batteries. So that was not a great sign. And in '78 it got even worse, because by 1978 nobody was introducing cameras with mercury batteries except Konica. And that was the T4. And the T4 it was only made for 1 year. You don't see them very often, and it has a lot of plastic body panels. All of these are all metal, right? The so-called built like a tank, all metal SLRs are right here. This one has a lot of plastic. Wasn't produced for very long. It's comparable. A competition from Nikon was the FM, which outclasses the T4 by leaps and bounds. You don't see these things a whole lot on the used market, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. I will, however, mention the TC. Along with the Auto Reflex T series, T1, the numbered series, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. In 1976, Konica introduced a budget model called the TC. And the TC it had a lot of plastic body panels. It had a restricted shutter speed range. It did not have a dedicated mirror lockup. I'm not sure. It did not have a depth of field preview. So, but otherwise, it was still basically a decent camera. It was still all mechanical, no batteries required. Uses the hexagon lenses, and it's worth looking at because they're really, really cheap, and you can find these things on the secondhand market quite easily, and they're very inexpensive. So even though it has a lot of plastic to it and it's somewhat decontented, the TC is still worth looking at. There was another model called the Auto Reflex A that was produced alongside the T1, T2, and T3, but you don't see those on the secondhand market very often. They were seriously decontented, top shutter speed of 1/500th. No self-timer, no mirror lockup, no depth of field preview. Not much to recommend them, and you don't see them very often. And given how inexpensive the top-level cameras are, why would you even consider one? So let's talk about the features. What do you get when you get an Auto Reflex? So here are the features shared by all of the Auto Reflex cameras in the series. First and foremost, like all the other built like a tank cameras, the Auto Reflexes were fully mechanical. They offered no electronics of any kind. The shutter fires on all speeds without batteries. In addition, it has a Copal square shutter. I am a big fan of the Copal square shutter. I believe the Copal square shutter is one of the most ingenious, durable, and reliable photographic inventions of the 20th century, and I prefer cameras that use the Copal square shutter. I think they've held up better over time than traditional cloth shutters. I did a separate video on that, so have a look if you feel like it. The Auto Reflexes were interesting in that it used a needle capture automatic exposure system. That is, these cameras had auto exposure. You see here the EE indication, which, by the way, EE stood for electric eye. That's what auto exposure was called back in the day, electric eye, at least in the mid-60s. So you set the lens on auto exposure, and now the camera is going to set the aperture, and you will set the shutter speed in what is known as a shutter-preferred auto exposure system. The interesting thing about Konica is that, unlike, say, Canon's shutter-preferred auto exposure systems, Konica's was completely mechanical. It used what's something called a needle capture system, where you've got the you've got the meter needle that moves up and down in the viewfinder, and then this metal arm comes out and grabs it as soon as you press the shutter release button. You have pressed the shutter release button. A mechanical arm grabs the needle and then communicates that to the lens in order to set the aperture. It's a neat system. It works fairly well. I had a T2 and a T3 many years ago, which I had voltage converted, and the automatic exposure system worked beautifully. It worked just fine. All of the Auto Reflexes offer speeds of 1 to 1/1000th plus B, with an X-sync at 1/125th. Again, that's because it's a vertically traveling shutter. This is true of all the Auto Reflexes except the TC. and the A. But again, I'm not talking about the A because you don't see those very often. The TC, however, did not have all of the same shutter speeds. I think the lowest shutter speed on the TC is either 1/15 or 1/8, and it does not have a depth of field preview feature. Other than those two features, the rest of these will be found on the TC. All the Auto Reflexes offer a self-timer. Mirror lockup is bundled with the self-timer function, very similar to the Nikon FM series. And they all use cadmium sulfide metering cells. And here's the kicker, the PX625 mercury battery. Now here's the problem. This is why, and this may be why Konicas are so inexpensive. The mercury battery problem with the Konicas is actually worse than most other models. So most cameras with a mercury battery, the battery look like this. This is often called a button cell. So it has a very distinctive look to it. If your camera takes one of these, it was originally made of mercury. Nowadays you can buy alkaline replacement cells. This is an alkaline replacement cell, and their specific purpose is to be used in cameras originally designed for mercury batteries. So one of the potential solutions to mercury batteries is an adapter, and I forgot what it's called. It's called I don't want to give you the wrong name, but there is a little gizmo you can buy. I think they cost like $30 or $40. They're not cheap, but it's a shell essentially shaped like this, into which you insert an LR44. Here's an LR44 battery. Then you take the adapter that's shaped like this, and you insert the LR44 into the adapter, and the adapter has a resistor inside which lowers the output from 1.5 volts to 1.35 volts, consistent with what the mercury batteries used to do. And that is one of the most popular solutions for mercury battery powered cameras. Well, that's not available with the Konicas, because unlike everybody else, for some reason, Konica just had to be different. And they don't use the PX675, which looked like this. They used a PX625, which was identical in size and shape to the LR44. So here's a couple of LR44 batteries. Here's my Konica camera, and if I unscrew the battery the battery system, the battery compartment here, I'm going to unscrew it just like any other camera of that period. Unscrew it with a coin. It's going to open up the battery compartment, and I said it's going to open up the battery compartment. Now, there you go. All right. So you open up the battery compartment like so, and here's your LR44, and the LR44 is going to fit, oops, dropped the wrong side. Not that it really matters, I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes. But the LR44 is going to fit right down there, just like the original mercury batteries. So there's an LR44 in the Konica. The problem is, I tried this when I inserted these batteries and I tested the light meter. It was off by 2 stops in bright daylight. And my understanding is the reading distortions is logarithmic, not linear. So even though it's off by 2 stops in daylight, I'm not sure if I can compensate with the ASA dial, because I believe the distortion may not be the same, say in dim lighting. In daylight, this light meter with these batteries will underexpose by 2 stops. Maybe in dim lighting it'll overexpose by a stop. I really don't know, but I'm not sure if it's possible to simply adjust the ASA to compensate. I don't think it is. I don't think the distortion is linear and consistent across all light readings. So that's a big problem with the Konicas. But again, the gospel that I've been preaching, or the message that I've been preaching recently, is don't worry about the freaking light meter. These old cadmium sulfide light meters are going to break. They will break eventually. And these cameras, these old built like a tank cameras, I mean, look at this thing. This is all metal. There is no plastic on the exterior of this camera. You have to look hard to find any plastic on this camera. The only plastic I can find is this battery check button, the red thing right there. That's plastic. And what else? Oh yes, the little eyepiece here. This is plastic. It's hard rubber. It's not plastic. It's rubber. And that's it. Everything else on this camera is metal. If you want to see more plastic, you got to open it up. So what's the big deal if the light meter is not working? You still have an indestructible 35 millimeter camera that takes really, really nice lenses. So why bother? Why hassle with the light meter is my point. And given how cheap these things are, I mean, you're getting your money's worth. Even without a functioning light meter, you are getting your money's worth with this camera. They're that good. I mean, they're comparable to the Nikkormats, in my opinion. Well, no, it's not my opinion. They are comparable to the Nikkormats. That's not my opinion. That's a fact. So have a look at the Konica system. If you're thinking about 35 millimeter and you're not sure what to get into and you're on a budget, but you want something really nice and really classic, consider a Konica system. I'm going to put a link down in the description to a website which details the history and features of the Konica SLRs and the Hexanon lenses. This is the only website that I know of that has such detailed information about the Konica system. It is available in both English and German. I remember seeing this website 15 years ago. So I mean, it's like a turn of the century style website, if you will. For the younger viewers, it'll be an interesting bit of internet archaeology. But nonetheless, it does have very detailed, very good, very accurate information about the Konica system. And to my knowledge, it's the only web resource that has that much information about Konica. There's just not that much information out there. My recommendation, take advantage of other people's ignorance. Use your information superiority to save money and get yourself a really, really nice 35 millimeter system. Well, that's essentially, that's my message for the day. Consider Konica. Nobody else is. Nobody's talking about these things. And they're really inexpensive. These things, they're cheaper than Minoltas, they're cheaper than Canons. And there's no logical reason for that. I guess Canon and Minolta, they had a larger selection of lenses, but in terms of quality, there's nothing wrong with the Hexanons. Hexanon lenses can hold their own against anything made by Canon or Minolta, and arguably Nikon and Pentax as well. So consider it, give it some thought, take a look at that website, and if you're getting into 35 millimeter, don't follow the herd, don't follow the crowd, don't be a sheep, be an individual, do your own thing, use information wisely. Okay, that is my preaching for the day. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Take care.